Welcome to the Moral Courage Podcast, lessons from the study of Rabbi Harold M. Schulweis of blessed memory, a podcast addressing today's trends and headlines through interviews and conversations with Jewish leaders, inspired by the works of Rabbi Harold M. Schulweis that make Jewish wisdom more accessible, inclusive, and relevant to today's complicated world. Our guests share their Jewish journeys and discuss how Rabbi Schulweis's wisdom provides inspiration and guidance to us today. Hosted by Rabbi Ari Averbach, Senior Rabbi at Temple Etz Chaim in Thousand Oaks, California, and board member of the Harold M. Schulweis Institute, an affiliate of Valley Beth Shalom in Encino, California.
Shalom Aleichem. Welcome. I'm so happy to see you, Rabbi Becky Hoffman. I feel like I've known you forever, for decades. Our paths keep crossing in so many different ways. But thank you for joining us today on Moral Courage.
It's wonderful to see you.
I want to get to so many things, but I want to start with your path to the rabbinate. How did you end up in this very strange field that we're both in?
There's so many ways to describe the story, but I think it started with my bat mitzvah because, you always wonder, what am I going to be when I grow up? And at my bat mitzvah, the Rabbi Jim Hoffman from Temple Beth Hillel, took me in front of the ark and gave me a private blessing. And as part of that blessing, he said to me, you should become a rabbi. And I know. And then you live with it for a while, because you want to figure out who you are and what you want to do with your life. And then, my path was I would say a very typical kind of path, president of the youth group, TA in religious school, and Jewish summer camp. And then I finally got to college and I was like, okay, this is the time that I'm going to find myself and really figure out what I'm going to be. And it turns out Jewish education and the Jewish field was my calling. And then I started to share with people that my rabbi said to me, I should consider becoming a rabbi, to which my younger brother and sister both said to me, he said the same thing to us. And
I was wondering, did he say, what a great line, and we should be doing this more to encourage it. Is he saying it to everybody?
He said it, well, at least to everyone in my family, but I'm the one who took him seriously. So maybe that's the process. So that's how the idea was planted about becoming a rabbi. And then truly it was a matching of passion and interest and where I found my personal connection.
But also the fact that you remember it. By the time I give the bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah kid a charge at the end of the service and I say something, so often their mind is like bagels and cream cheese. Like, where is their mind? YMCA and Macarena, whatever the kids are, Pepsi, 7-Up. Right, and I've said things that I've been so proud of in that moment as a rabbi, and I say it to the kid, I'm like, they're hearing none of these words. And so the fact that you took it, you internalized it, and then I think also the fact that if you become president of the youth group and an aide in the religious school, it was already somewhere in you.
Yeah. My husband and I, who was on the podcast as well, Rabbi Joshua Hoffman, we talk about bloomed and groomed. And that there are rabbis who bloom, that all of a sudden they, whether it's in college or had some kind of experience, which is really more his story, which is a bloomed story, that it just kind of emerged out of a moment, versus my story, which is truly a groomed story, that I was very involved in a synagogue. I went to a Jewish day school, Jewish summer camp. There is a pathway that makes sense in how I became a rabbi.
Sure. I feel when I told people I was thinking about rabbinical school, which I kept it a secret for a long time, I wanted to know what was going on. When I told my rabbi friends, the rabbis in my life, they weren't friends yet, that I was thinking of rabbinical school, everybody's response was, don't do it. And I'm so sad that that's the narrative out there. And I love that your childhood rabbi, who was a gadol in the LA reform movement, he was one of the great ones, still is, that he's encouraging it and saying it in a loving way to people and making it seem like this is a career that I love enough to tell you to also think about it.
I think there's also, and I wonder if that message had changed because I'm a little bit older than you. And so, the idea of like when I was becoming a bat mitzvah and my siblings, like the, there was a lot of, especially in the reform movement, a lot of pride, a lot of connection. And I felt that. And I never felt from any of my clergy or educators, anyone that I encountered that said, run from this. It wasn't until I was in rabbinical school where all of a sudden rabbis are like, are you sure? Like, do you want to do this? And it's, you know, it does take a certain personality. But and I'll just share, since becoming a rabbi, I don't say that to kids, like that they should consider becoming a rabbi, except for one student who I still think should really consider becoming a rabbi. She would be an absolute asset to the rabbinate. And I take that very seriously from my family experience, where we were all told to become rabbis. And truly, I love my brother and my sister. They should not be rabbis, but they're wonderful at what they do.
Yeah, right. And it takes a certain kind of person to want to do this and to feel like they could thrive in this in a certain way.
Yeah.
How has the rabbinate, changed, you think? Give me the top 1,000 ways the rabbinate's changed in your, in my time and in your time, since we've entered either school or really thought about it seriously, or just in the last, 15 years.
Well, I got ordained. I'm going to look up at my certificate so that I can remember what year. I was ordained in 2006. And that was right, it was right before the financial crisis. And, there were jobs, but all of a sudden jobs started to disappear. And there was this feeling, when I started rabbinical school, it was all about learn how to set your boundaries and be very clear about what your boundaries are. Well, then all of a sudden it went from learn how to set your boundaries to, am I going to have a job? Will there be a way that I can support myself, my family? And, I've been very fortunate to have work when I needed it. But I have colleagues that did not necessarily, and they were more than qualified and, wonderful people, but all of a sudden to go from, there's a plethora of work to no work, and to have this training of you need to draw lines to there are no lines because there is no work. I think that really impacted the rabbinate in almost a domino effect, where people really had to rethink, what does it mean to be in a movement? What does it mean to be a rabbi? This is the emergence of the entrepreneurial rabbi, and really changing how we think about the business. And so many times we don't want to think about the rabbinate as a business, but what are the things that we are going to have to do to remain competitive, to stay open, to have a job? That impacted me greatly, and I think a lot of the people that I was ordained with.
And you think part of that is removing of boundaries, in that every congregant of mine has my cell phone number because I need to be on call 24/7, because if not, they will find another institution, whether it's another synagogue or anything else, to help them through their happy and their sad moments, to give meaning to their lives.
Exactly. Accessibility is that's a technological change. I still have a calling service at my synagogue. So I get emergency calls after hours, but on my machine, my personal message is, if you have a life cycle emergency, call me on my cell phone, text me. And some people, there's this one congregant, fortunately she passed away this past year. My first week on the job here, I was taking pictures of something, and she was taking pictures at the same time. She goes, give me your cell phone. I'll send you these pictures. I promise I won't abuse it. From that week on, every Friday morning at 7:30 in the morning, I received a Shabbat Shalom text from her. It was lovely. It was kind. It was sweet.
Yeah.
But, I'm like, I love you. I care for you. Sometimes I don't appreciate a text at 7 o'clock in the morning, but that's the changing nature of what we do.
Yeah. And I mean, we'll get to more about Rabbi Schulweis, I think, in a little bit, but I think about how he would have been in this time. He was a person who like never used a computer, because why do you need it? You have book. I mean, I have books. You have books. You have Midrash. You don't need Sefaria. You don't need to be constantly online. And I spend my day in front of a computer, emailing, calling, learning, Zooming, whatever I'm doing. And then I go, as I'm walking out of the building, I'm on my phone checking my email again in case in the last 5 seconds an email came in with Rabbi, quick question.
Yeah, all the time.
Right. So that's I think the biggest change is kind of where our lives start and end. And it's interesting how that I think changes who is drawn to the job. I don't know how much the people understand it, but this went from a job of a certain kind of person to I feel like the role of rabbi has really changed from whatever it was to the word therapist isn't right, and I don't have a degree in therapy, but to being a support system, which that I wonder if Rabbi Hoffman had that, or if he was like,
He was one of the first. I mean, I didn't know it at the time because he was my rabbi, but he was a different kind of rabbi, right? When I was, I became a member before I don't know, when I was born. So I didn't know any different, but I didn't know about Rabbi Bauman, who was he was the senior rabbi, and he was the rabbi, sermons. And I mean, I never even heard him speak. I didn't even know he was the rabbi because I went to nursery school. I was in Touchbot, I went to family services, and it was Rabbi Jim, right? He wasn't Rabbi Kaufman. He was Rabbi Jim, which is actually a big influence on me that, I don't see myself as Rabbi Hoffman. I'm Rabbi Becky. And so that was a very big influence, that the rabbi wasn't somebody on the bima with big words and loud and, banging on the pulpit. It was the guy sitting in the room playing the guitar and like casual like us and dressing up in a funny costume on Purim. And to me, that was this very accessible person. And that's a really big influence. And I could see, that change of what I think the dilemma, and it was probably his dilemma as well, is we need to be both. And how can you be both fun and accessible and inspirational and this big personality that you can talk to a 2-year-old and you can talk to a 100-year-old? Like, who are
right.
we? And so many of us, and kudos to rabbis, we do a lot of this really well, but there's some things that we do better than others, but we do a lot of things really well.
Nobody can be all of the things because it's just too much. I'm working with the conservative movement right now on helping rabbis define, when they're looking for a job, helping them define what they think are their strongest points in the job. Nobody can be great at everything, and nobody wants to do everything. Some people are great with budgets, but they don't ever want to touch budgets. They go, that's not, I don't want to be in that world. And so to define where they are. I came into this job thinking I'm going to be Rabbi Averback. I grew up with Rabbi Schulweis, Rabbi Feinstein, Rabbi Hoffman. And if you were friendly with them, you could call him Joshua. Nobody called him Harold. People called, Rabbi Feinstein Eddie. And I got here thinking I'm going to be Rabbi Averback. I found that so many of the little kids, we have a great preschool, we have a religious school, and some of the kids, Averback is hard. And so I became Rabbi Ari to them, which meant that like as they grow up, if I'm Rabbi Ari when they're 5, and then I'm Rabbi Ari when they're 10, when they're B'nai Mitzvah, when they're adult, when the parents are involved, my first name sticks and it's easier to pronounce. You are very famously married to another Rabbi Hoffman. What a coincidence. Did it ever come up like conservative versus reform? Not like in a fight, I imagine. Like, what does that look like at home? What does it look like in how you're living? There must be some sort of like interesting mix there.
We always say that we're an interfaith marriage.
Sure.
I'll share, being on the West Coast, him being a conservative rabbi is definitely on the more progressive end of conservative Judaism. However, when you get married and you bring your lives together, you have to compromise. And every marriage goes through that. Like, what is it that's going to be the compromise? So for us, the biggest compromise was Pyrex. So we, I didn't grow up keeping kosher. So, I started to keep kosher once I was dating him and like saying, it's not that he demanded it by any stretch. It was like, okay, so he keeps kosher. I wonder what this is all about. Is this something that I can incorporate into my life? And then I found it meaningful for me. And then we're setting up our home. And everything I knew about glass and Pyrex was that it was non-porous and that we wouldn't need to have two sets. And he said, no, we absolutely have to have two sets. And I didn't understand why. And then finally I said, fine, well, we can have two sets of Pyrex. So that's the biggest compromise issue, that fight, I guess you could say, that we had. But, the most important thing is that we talked it out and we listen to one another. And there's times where we absolutely disagree, but it's not enough to like say, well, enough with this, and
Right.
we find a way.
One of my close friends is a conservative, considers herself conservative Jew, grew up conservative Jew. Dad was president of the conservative synagogue, and her husband's a reform rabbi. And the other day she goes, I'm just not going to keep kosher anymore. It's just too hard. I was like, what? Like, just for her, that's a huge life change. And for some people, they don't care, but for her, it's a huge life change. And like her answer was, more like this, of like the Reform temple where her husband's a rabbi doesn't hold on to kashrut in the same way. And so, that's where the conversation is. But like, aside from that, do any of the kids, like, because it feels interfaith, do they ever go like, oh, I'm mom's religion versus that, or like you found a balance in the middle?
No, they're really, listen, my kids went to conservative day school. They went to Milken. They went to Camp Ramah. Sometimes my little reform Jewish heart hurts that that they don't know all of Debbie Friedman's music. But at the same time, they're good people. They have great values. They care about their Judaism. They love one another. They want to do good things in the world. So, if right now they all keep kosher. 2 are in college still. So it's not that we've demanded that of them. That's something that they have chosen for themselves. So we'll see what happens, but more than anything, they're just really good people. I kind of like them a lot.
Yeah. I usually like my kids too. We'll see. And
you
no
start to like them more when they get older.
Sure. But also, we're aware, no matter how much you mandate things of your children, they're going to find their own path. And it's one of the hard parts about being a parent is when they're born, you get to make every decision for them. And as they grow up, you have less and less of a hold. And there's a reason that B'nai Mitzvah were set so long ago at this age, is because this is when they're trying to figure themselves out, and their friends and pop stars you've never heard of and YouTubers that you didn't even know existed are much more of an influence on them in some ways. And in other ways, they're still watching you and going, oh, okay, we're doing it this way.
Yeah.
For nearly 20 years, you were part of the community at VBS in some way with Rabbi Schulweis and with Malka. Were there interactions? Was it like they were kind of on their, retirement kind of journey when you got there?
So when Josh started working at VBS, Rabbi Schulweis was still the senior rabbi, and Malka was still working. So they were both, very involved in their lives. One of my first memories of that, a lot of my memories actually involve Malka more than
Yeah.
Rabbi Schulweis. So Joshua started working there, and about a year after he was working is when we had our first child. Ethan was born, and we were living in a condo. So just kind of give some context of, we only had one refrigerator and freezer at the time, and Malka brought an entire cooked turkey to us. She said, "You can put it in the freezer. You never know. You can always have turkey." And I was like, "This is amazing." So she just cooked us a turkey to have, and we would slowly, like, we cut it up. We slowly would eat this turkey. And then after our second child was born, Ari, Malka bought her a beautiful velvet coat from Nordstrom. And she was like, "Every child needs a beautiful coat." And I was like, "They do. Every child does need a beautiful coat."
Especially every child in Sherman
And
Oaks,
Sherman Oaks,
where
who was
the
born
winters
in
get down to
August.
70. Yeah.
So, it was like those little things where I had these like amazing interactions with them, and just being there and knowing what they both gave to the community, and the model of a dual career couple, in the rabbinate. With the rabbinate, it was really, it was an honor to kind of to be in that space with them.
I mean, whenever we talk about Rabbi Schulweis, Malka comes up. She was a force. There are whispers, only by me, it's one of my conspiracy theories, that she wrote his sermons. I mean, speaking with her she was so professorial and so deep and so wonderful. And like, also, I'm now missing that generation, right? My family has never made a turkey, let alone brought something over that grand to somebody who had a baby. We need the meal train to know what day we can bring it over and what their allergies are, and then maybe we'll. But like, to just magnanimously show up and go, and here is. I heard that you and Josh are about to finish the turkey. You're just on the last pieces
Around
of
the
it. I
last
know.
pieces, finally, yeah.
And also, I mean, how much we needed her in the transition of what a Rebbitzin is, because it went from the Rebbitzin is the job of the rabbi's wife, and in some communities it still is, and that's fine, to she's her own person. She was not hired by the synagogue. She can have her own career and her own likes, and if she shows up to shul, great, and if not, great, but she's not expected to be kind of the de facto head of sisterhood and making tuna salad and teaching classes. She can, and she doesn't have to.
Right. It was really, I mean, for that day and age, it was truly remarkable. Like, when, you know, in our marriage, Joshua started rabbinical school first, and from the conservative, from Ziegler and that path, you go to school in LA for 2 years, and then you spend your third year in Israel. And that's when I started. So in his first 2 years of rabbinical school, he had an internship. And when he would go to his internship as the student rabbi, and we were first engaged and then married, the congregation would look at me like the Rebbitzin. And by that time, I'd already had a master's in education, and I was doing my own work, but they were like, "So are you going to help put out the cookies?" And expecting to kind of to draft me into this support role. And so when he started at VBS, to not have that at all, like, it wasn't even a question that I was my own person. I was on my own path. I mean, also the fact that, with Rabbi Feinstein's, right, that both of them
Sure.
were rabbis, like, that it was a given that I was not going to function in that way.
I'm glad you had that model, because also, right, and at some point at two separate synagogues, and to balance that out, and you got to then also on top of that figure out I mean, just thinking on the babysitting side of it, is when's your Purim event and our Purim event, and which one are we going? Are we going to both of them, and who's taking the kids? Are we hired? All of those parts of it. I've heard it said that rabbis have 1 or 2 sermons that they give over and over for their entire career. For Rabbi Schulweis, I think a lot of it is about bringing God down to earth. This idea of God as a verb, and which some have said that therefore he didn't believe in God, and others saying, oh, he's finally making God make sense for us. I find that I have generally like 2 sermons that I give over and over. Do you think, is there 1 or 2 that you go, most of my sermons revolve around the theme of something?
Of course. I always say, that, people are always so impressed. Oh, you can pull out text or this verse and it's just like the perfect verse. It's like, we really know 5 verses really well. And those are the ones we keep coming back to. I think that I come back frequently to the idea of a response to change, that our world around us is constantly in flux, and how we respond to change is it's a it's an indication of who we are and how we adjust as people. And so for me, the idea of the destruction of the temple and how Judaism is this outgrowth, and the Judaism that we experience now is 100% change and innovation.
Yeah.
And so the rabbis allowed us to innovate. And I find myself, I at times having to, how can I say this differently?
I feel like that's what I give in classes. My sermons are often different, but I love pulling out the Talmud and opening it in front of students, whether they're high school students or empty nesters or whoever it is, and essentially saying the Talmud starts off, like the whole concept of Mishnah and Talmud, of Gemara, is our world is different than the world of our parents. How are we going to understand our sacred texts in this world that is so different than the one before? I feel like whoever I say it to, they're like, our world is different than our parents. And whatever generation you're in, right? My kid's world is totally different than the world that I grew up in. And the things that I hold to be so true are things that don't affect them sometimes, are things that don't affect them at all. And yet, how do we find this mutuality, this community, this way of having conversation in a world that is changing?
And I think that's one of the things Rabbi Schulweis did so well, and what made him, and people talk about his natural oratory and his pulpit presence, but really in times of great change, he was able to see through to what could be. And that to me is the genius of the rabbinic tradition. It's like you have all this noise and you can interpret that noise in all of these different ways. But this is the way. And I think that in line with that rabbinic tradition, Rabbi Schulweis was really able to pinpoint the lesson, the path, the idea. And that truly is, when you have that, and as a rabbi, you sometimes get this sense that you hit that moment. It feels rare. It's like throwing spaghetti at the wall, right? Like you just keep throwing and like hopefully one is going to stick. He was just masterful at finding that idea that would stick at the right place at the right time.
I'm writing this down going, oh wait, there's a high holiday idea right there. There's something, that the fact that you can interpret this line in so many ways. Why not choose the kindest? Why not choose the most loving? Why are we sometimes reading the narrowest reading of this? I happened to have a moment with somebody who used to be one of the something big at HUC this week. We were at a life cycle event together. And also I'm involved in the Ziegler School, and I just spoke at AJR, thanks to your husband inviting me down there. And so I've gotten glimpses into different places. I know they're all in this place of flux right now. They're all trying to figure out, what do you do? How many campuses do you need? How many students? How do you attract? Like all of this. And so maybe it's just in my head right now, but if you could add a class to rabbinical school, what if in the last 20, you've been a rabbi now for almost 20 years, there are things, I'm going to guess that most of what you do day to day was not covered in rabbinical school. We learned a lot of amazing things. I loved rabbinical school and I used the skills, but if you could add a class or take away a class, and it's nothing about the professor, it's not saying this professor wasn't incredible, but if you could change something in the curriculum, what's something that you would maybe do?
My husband and I, because he is now, the president of the Academy of Jewish Religion of California, we have this conversation because he actually can and seriously wants to answer this question. So one of the things that I wish I could incorporate into rabbinical school is, how can you attain passive income as a rabbi? Because
Hmm.
the changing nature of the rabbinate is that, and who knows, synagogue wise, like it, and it's something that you said also, like the skills that we are good at and the skills where we are not. And sometimes the expectations on the rabbi are just unrealistic. So why should we create unrealistic expectations where people are not going to succeed? Create the job where they're going to succeed. It may not be a full-time job, so you supplement it with another person who has skills. So I actually gave a sermon about this past year. Moneyball, right? You look at the Oakland A's and you find ways, you lose the Johnny Damon who fulfills all of these needs on the baseball team. Well, choose three other players who match those needs, and you've replaced Johnny Damon. So what does that mean in the rabbinic world? Well, maybe we can't find a one for a Harold Schulweis, but we could find three people. But what does that mean? That means that none of them are earning necessarily the salaries that they should be earning or could be earning to live in a place like Los Angeles. So how do they supplement their income? Do they learn how to create a franchise? Do they learn how to invest in real estate? Is it learning about investments in the stock market? And, how can you supplement your income in a way so that you can live this passion in the
Hmm.
changing world of what it means to be a rabbi and the changing nature of the synagogue. So I'm not necessarily sure what the class would be called, but I think that there's something. It's not lofty. It's very practical, and I think that it addresses and it talks about the fact that the needs of the synagogue are not necessarily always being met, and that rabbis don't necessarily always have every single skill that a congregation needs at a particular time.
Right. Building your own personal rabbinate. Something. I remember like we finished rabbinical school. We're days away from ordination. I feel like that's where we were. And we get called into like the president's office, some conference room. And it was like, we had a meeting about retirement. We're like, what? It's like, we're not even rabbis yet. It was like, okay, but you have to understand this is a job and here's how much it might pay. And you might move around all those pieces of it. We go, oh, wow, this is, a few days before it's official. And we're already thinking about, is this going to work?
Right.
Is this a career?
If you think about the model of the rabbis in the Talmud, right? Many of them, they weren't just rabbis. They had other careers. They were shop owners, they were shepherds, they were they had a way to live, and then they had this other passion of education and learning. So
Right.
there's something to that.
Yeah, I feel lucky that I have this model that I'm currently living in, knowing that it's essentially a new model. And if I were a rabbi 200 years ago, it wouldn't be like this. It's very, I've heard the word Protestant used. Like it's very kind of churchy in how this is set up. And we share our campus with a Methodist church. and their offices are similar to ours, and their service timing and service layout are similar to ours, which is not how it was hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago.
Even 10, I mean, just look, my synagogue 10 years ago, what our synagogue was the only business on our property. Well, now we have a charter school that uses our school building.
Mm,
We have an outside preschool that rents our facilities. You know, we earn, name a synagogue, we all earn income from being in Los Angeles for being used on TV or movies. So there's our buildings have passive income. Why shouldn't we? And that might help with some of with the changing nature of the rabbinate.
right. I mean, and you said you became a rabbi right before the 2008 crash.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we could, like, how many moments we could name that are similar to that, because I got my job here in Thousand Oaks. First of all, it was the day I got my offer, the day of the Woolsey fire, which evacuated almost everybody in our synagogue. The same day was the shooting at Borderline in our area.
Right.
8 months after I started was COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And then in my fourth year, whatever it was, I think my fourth year was October 7th. It's like every little bit, we haven't had like a normal year here. And sometimes we'll come up to a program and go, well, what did we do last year for this? You go, oh, you can't count last year because that was also when this thing happened. You go,
Right.
oh, like, it's just a reminder, as you said before, the world keeps changing.
Yeah.
And our rabbis 2,000 years ago knew that.
I know.
Thank you for
I
reminding
signed
me
my
how fascinating this
contract.
job is.
Yeah, I signed my contract for this place 5 days before the world shut down for COVID. Like, I was at
Right.
APAC in DC.
Oh, right.
Received the contract for my current position, signed it, and then went into shutdown. So I started this job, and it was my first time as a senior rabbi, and I felt like, well, I'm on equal footing with everyone because we're all in this unknown together. And who would have all the time? I mean, that whole entire year of COVID kept saying they didn't teach us this in rabbinical school. It was absolutely, no one taught us this. And who would have thought? Now you walk into, I don't know about your sanctuary space, but we have live stream with 3 cameras. We just put in screens in the front of the room and we're trying to figure out, like, what do screens look like in the synagogue space? How do we use them as slides? Like, again, who would have thought? But those are now becoming essential skills. It's an ever-changing world, and as a rabbi, you have to change with it.
And wait a couple of months and listen back to this conversation. Everybody who's listening, listen again in a couple of months, and you're going to realize that everything we're saying is out the window because AI or Iran or name something else has changed the landscape so entirely. It's something that we're like really grappling with. I have friends who aren't, and no judgment, who aren't writing sermons because who needs to? You type into Claude or one of the other AI models, the Torah portion is, and I want to talk about Israel, or I want to talk about community or something. 5 seconds later, there's your sermon Friday afternoon. You hit the button and you go up on the beam and you give it. And at some point you go, all right, is this an essential part of our job to write and to think? Or are people okay with learning something, even if it comes from...
Well, take it a step further, right? Because you can upload your entire, like, everything that you have written over the past 15, 20 years, right? And say, learn my voice, make it sound like me. By the way, this is one of the reasons why, and I'll admit it fully, like, I'm involved with ChatGPT. ChatGPT is my friend, but that's what my friend ChatGPT. But it's because I need to know what it can and can't do so that I can use it responsibly. And I don't shy away from the fact that I want to know its capability because I don't want to be left behind. And I know again, going back to this thing about slides, like I'm like, what do I need to know about slides in synagogue usage? It came up with an entire guide for me. I didn't know I needed a guide. It came up, it was like, don't you think you need a guide? I'm like, I do. But you know,
Wow.
it's real, but how would I have known that? And so that way, being, you want to talk about filling in deficiencies, like, you know, this is a way that in a small synagogue where, I mean, my full-time staff is like 5 people, how can we become more efficient, faster, better? You know, just like you said, there's a lot of minutia. I would love to sit around thinking and writing and talking and doing the good work all the time, but there's still a budget and a calendar that needs to be written. And if Chat GPT or some other AI resource can help me with that minutia of, like, you know, writing a letter, or, you know, formatting something that I've already written in another year, why shouldn't I use it? It makes
Yeah.
me faster and better at what I do.
Right. And if you can only afford one person to do this job, it's really a 5-person job. What are the parts that you can have somebody else or some other model taken care of so I could do the most important things that can't be done? Because at this point, who knows what it's going to be a few months from now? At this point, that model can't go visit the sick.
Right.
At this point, that model can't officiate a funeral. And
Right.
so if you need me to be in 3 places at once, I've got to use my resources wisely. All right, well, this is very scary to me now.
But I think it just goes back to, what do rabbis need to do best? And that's the
Right,
interpersonal, right? It cannot be replaced. And so we need
right,
to double down on that.
right. We both learned at the feet of Ron Wolfson, now Rabbi Ron Wolfson, who reminded us that the heart of our job is relational. How
Mhm.
are we there for people most in their times of need and celebration? And right, and the boundaries are fascinating right now. Our final question is always, what is something that you are learning, studying? What is a text that is troubling you or bringing you joy? Could be any kind of text at all.
So I've been reading, I'm looking at it right now. Okay. Hidden Potential by Adam Grant. And at the end of the book, it's a whole book about, like, how do we find our hidden potential. And at the end of the book, he has a quote, and it says, be a good ancestor. And I think, I think as Jewish people, we're like, well, duh, yeah, of course, be a good ancestor. But I love these moments where modern, I don't want to say pop culture, but, like, here's this guy who is teaching us about how to be better workers, more thoughtful, efficient, and to discover new things about ourselves. And yet, one of his key ideas is something that is just a natural part of who we are. Be a good ancestor, right? Remember that you
Mm-hmm.
were slaves in Egypt. Be like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Like, it's just intrinsic to our tradition. And I love those moments where these ideas that seem so innovative on in the organizational psychology area, or behavioral economics, are just ancient ideas that are a natural part of who we are as Jews. And so, to me, like, that idea of be a good ancestor, it's so basic to our tradition. And yet, it why do we say the Amidah every single week? Because we constantly need to be reminded to be a good ancestor and to have that perspective giving.
That's beautiful. And I think there's always, we forget that we're part of that lineage, and we so often think of ourselves as the final link, the bottom link. And then you see a parent watch their kids singing Lador Vador on the Bima. And there's the parents who might not be weekly, participants in synagogue services, might not be doing much Judaism outside of shul, and yet they're sobbing in the front row, and there's grandma crying in the front row because here's this kid singing Lador Vador, a reminder that you are now an ancestor,
Mhm.
that this is being, whatever you're doing, what you are teaching your kid is being passed on to the next generation. And to then see them using it wisely and thriving is such a cool thing.
Yeah, definitely.
I love it. Well, Thank you so much. It's always nice spending time with you, and I appreciate that we have like a formal way to catch up and chat all across the valley. So thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Moral Courage podcast. We are produced by the Harold M. Schulweis Institute at Valley Beth Shalom, which supports these podcasts in addition to educational programs within Valley Beth Shalom, the Schulweis Library, changing exhibitions at the Liner Chapel at VBS, Jewish World Watch, and the Jewish Community Children's Choir. The Moral Courage podcast is hosted by Rabbi Ari Averbach. Our consulting producer is Esther Kostanowitz. Our technical producer is Eric Weiser. We are grateful for the support of the Institute and Haley Lazitsky-Weiser at SADCON Productions. To learn more about Rabbi Schulweis or to make a donation to help support these podcasts, visit the Institute website at hmsi.info.